faithfully conveying value, exploring good books worldwide.
Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk.
Today, I'll interpret the book Fear for you. Its English title is How Fear Works, meaning how fear operates. Fear is a common emotion and psychological state. However, there has never been a time in history like today where so many people feel fear so frequently. In this society where risks are everywhere, things that worry and scare us are increasing, such as global warming and environmental pollution. Well, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, down to sugar in milk tea, formaldehyde in furniture, carcinogens in cosmetics, it seems that unsafe factors around us are increasing. The book Fear will tell us why fear spreads. In today's society, how should we deal with this culture of fear? The author of this book is British sociologist Frank Furedi. He is an emeritus professor of sociology at the University of Kent and has written books like Culture of Fear, Politics of Fear, and Where Have All the Intellectuals Gone? Works such as Paranoid Parenting. The London Review of Books commented that without a doubt, Ferretti is one of the leading intellectuals in Britain, Europe, and even the world. The Sydney Morning Herald praised Ferretti as the most interesting thinker in the humanities. It should be noted that the content in Ferretti's book is mainly about the Western world, but the problems he describes in the book also exist to varying degrees in countries and regions outside the West. So, what exactly does this book say? Next, I'll interpret it for you in three parts. First, what are the characteristics of contemporary fear culture? Second, who is fueling the fear culture? Third, what are the harms of fear culture? How should we respond? All right, now let's start with the first part to look at the historical evolution of fear and the main characteristics of contemporary fear culture. Fear is first a physiological instinct. When humans or animals feel their lives threatened, they experience fear. But unlike animals, humans also have a fear habit inherited from culture. For example, animals may fear only when encountering predators, while humans can feel fear of death in daily life. Fear of death is the most primitive fear in human society and the prototype of all human fears. That's why, in the very dawn of human civilization, ancient sages were already contemplating death and fear, trying to ease humanity's anxiety about death. In ancient China, Confucius and Zhuangzi respectively pondered, "We don't know life, how can we know death?" And "Life and death are simultaneous." In ancient India, Shakyamuni Buddha taught the concept of nirvana, believing that only by seeing through life and death can one escape life's troubles and pains. In ancient Greece, philosopher Epicurus stated that once people truly understand death, they won't fear it anymore. He had a famous saying, "Death, this most terrifying thing. What is death to us?" It's not because while we're alive, death doesn't come. And when death comes, we're no longer here. What does it mean? It means that we and death can't exist at the same time. There's no need to worry about death because it has nothing to do with us. If Epicurus used deep philosophical reasoning to fight fear of death, another ancient Greek philosopher, Plato's solution was much more practical. In the Republic, Plato wrote that to make city-state soldiers unafraid of death and bravely go to battle, they must promote values of courage, boldness, and sacrifice, ensuring they fear defeat more than death in combat. And 1. Additionally, the city-state should implement policies to weaken soldiers' attachment to family, friends, or wealth, like granting fallen soldiers immortal heroic status. Plato's student Aristotle also believed that the virtue of courage could eliminate fear of death. If a person believes their actions are noble, they'll have fearless courage. Even death is nothing to fear. After fear of death, another ancient fear in human society is religious fear. The earliest gods were embodiments of fear. Ancient people thought gods caused rare natural phenomena like thunder, lightning, and hurricanes. Solar eclipses and comets were seen as divine warnings, while earthquakes and volcanic eruptions meant divine anger. This fear of gods isn't just a core feature of primitive religions, but also runs through monotheistic religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that worship only one God. So, The Old Testament of the Bible guides people on what to fear and what not to fear, and praises believers' fear and awe of God. Prophet Moses repeatedly encouraged the Jews to abandon fear of their enemies and replace it with fear of God. Moses said, "You shall fear the Lord," and in the scriptures, the fear of God is constantly reaffirmed. For example, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This religious fear also gave rise to a new fear, that of hell, where sinners are cast into hell. This threat terrifies any devout Christian. In modern Western society, with the decline of religious influence, both the fear of God and the fear of hell have greatly diminished in power. Just a century ago, people believed that science and reason could deal a fatal blow to fear. The British philosopher Bertrand Russell once said that science can help us overcome the fears that have made generations cower. However, the advancement of science has not made people fearless today. Instead, it has brought more fears. Oh, people in the past worried about divine punishment, which was relatively abstract, but today, people worry about the negative impacts of technology. Big and small things can become dangerous. Firstly, technological development has plunged the world into rapid change, leaving people feeling lost, and uncertainty is a major source of fear. Secondly, while technology brings convenience to our lives, it also introduces various new problems. For instance, the invention of plastics and the emission of greenhouse gases have worsened environmental pollution, and people seem helpless in the face of these new problems. Moreover, the more knowledge humans acquire, the larger the realm of the unknown becomes. What we know is like a circle, with the unknown realm outside it. As the area of this circle grows larger, its circumference also increases, leading to more contact with the unknown. This expanding realm of the unknown fuels people's fear of the future. According to the author Fioretti, the fear in today's human society differs greatly from that in the past, and it exhibits three characteristics. The first is the demoralization of fear. Well, as we just said, the main fears people had in the past were fear of death and religious fear. The ways people dealt with these two fears were closely tied to morality. To face the fear of death, what you need to do is summon courage from within or establish a value higher than life itself, all of which fall within the realm of morality. When facing religious fear, people need to use morality to guide themselves, rejecting evil and embracing good, in order to gain God's blessing. But today, the moral dimension of fear has been greatly diminished. This is directly related to the rise of psychology and psychoanalysis in the early 20th century. Psychologists and psychiatrists viewed fear as a negative emotion or a manifestation of underlying illness. For example, in the 1920s, many psychoanalysts believed fear was essentially neurasthenia and could easily lead to nervous breakdowns. By the 1930s, some psychologists interpreted fear of hell as a form of obsessive compulsion disorder. Some even believed fear of hell resulted from infantile weaning disorders. Thus, fear became a medical issue. People needed medication, not morality, to confront it. The second characteristic of today's fear culture is universalization, meaning that while past fears centered on life and death matters, now people detect potential risks in daily necessities, child rearing, and trivial life details, living in constant anxiety. For instance, raising children is the epicenter of modern anxiety and fear. Today's parents receive warnings from all directions, painting children's worlds as full of dangers. Playgrounds, once spaces for play and roughhousing, are now danger zones. Children might encounter chemical contamination, bloody accidents, bullying, or pedophiles on playgrounds. Choosing nannies requires extreme caution to prevent abuse, injury, or death. More frighteningly, these warnings often contradict each other. Some professionals advise keeping children out of direct sunlight to prevent skin cancer.
Yet others insist children need sun exposure to avoid vitamin D deficiency, while even stuffed toys pose risks.
Experts recommend choosing fabric toys over synthetic leather or hair-based ones. Since children chew and suck on objects, avoid toys with detachable parts to prevent choking hazards. Never place stuffed toys near a sleeping baby, or they might turn over and suffocate themselves. The author of this book laments that when even buying a teddy bear requires a risk assessment, there aren't many things in life that feel safe and reliable. The third characteristic of people's fear today is personalization, whereas in the past, people's fears were often collective. As humans, we collectively fear deities. As citizens of a kingdom, we collectively fear the monarch. But today, people's fears are mostly unrelated to the collective. Instead, they relate to the self. Multiple opinion polls show that today's people are most concerned with issues like financial security, rising prices, industry prospects, children's education, and other personal matters. People fear disability, fear getting cancer, fear not having money when urgently needed, and so on. Yet global terrorism, which is heavily covered by the media, is ironically the topic people worry least about. This shows that the fears and anxieties of the 21st century are not about global disasters, nor about society or the nation, but concentrated on personal and family concerns. All right, we've covered the historical evolution of fear and the main characteristics of contemporary fear culture. Let's discuss the second question. Who is fueling the culture of fear? The author's answer is media, politicians, and scientists. Yes, scientists are included. Is that a bit surprising to you? Let's go one by one, starting with the role of the media. Clearly, the media is the main force in spreading fear-inducing information. Day after day, the media bombards us with reports telling us that ecological crises are imminent, superviruses are looming, people's mental health is on the brink of collapse, and crime rates have just dipped a little, only to rise again. In short, this world might not get better. To grab people's attention, the media tends to use extreme rhetoric like risk of extinction, doom, tipping point, and so on. Taking The Guardian in the UK as an example, the word extinction appeared 93 times in this newspaper in 1988, increased to 207 times in 2007, and reached 602 times in 2016, almost twice a day. Keep in mind, The Guardian is known for being calm and objective, yet a word Western media particularly loves to use is time bomb. This word evokes a sense of impending doom. The bomb is already ticking, and once it explodes, it will spell disaster. The author writes that every day, his Google alerts push him a slew of time bombs, such as hamburger, fried chicken, and pizza chains, implying obesity time bombs.
Under the Arctic permafrost, a climate change time bomb is lurking.
Men in Western countries face a reproductive time bomb, and there are countless time bombs everywhere in the world. Ticking away, they could be mortgage loans, or dental treatments, or Syrian refugees in Lebanon, or bats in Australia's skies. In such an atmosphere, even programs like weather forecasts are filled with terrifying rhetoric. Things like storms, heavy snow, and high temperatures are actually common weather phenomena, but now they're all described as extreme weather. Behind phrases like extreme weather, the media increasingly emphasizes the world's risks as if everything is unexpected and unpredictable. The author believes that rather than the media creating fear, it deliberately caters to people's anxiety and fear for sales. All right, now that we've covered the media, let's look at politicians' performances. But the author points out that fear appeals and fear performances have become tools and strategies for Western politicians to manipulate public opinion and rally voters. And today's Western politicians seize every opportunity to showcase anxiety or fear, performing diligently to evoke insecurity in voters and win votes. For example, during Brexit, the Conservative Party and Labour Party debated whether to leave the EU or not. This issue descended into a prolonged battle. Interestingly, the two sides fiercely debated not whether it's better for the UK to stay in the EU or whether it's better to leave the EU. Instead, they discussed which would cause greater loss to the UK: stay in the EU or leave it. In other words, neither side used positive arguments to persuade. Instead, They attacked each other with a series of negative predictions. This is a typical fear performance. Let's look at an even more classic example. In 2002, former U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld attended a press conference.
A reporter on site asked him why the U.S. military went to Iraq but didn't find the so-called weapons of mass destruction.
Rumsfeld then said something like this. He said, "We know there are known knowns, things we know. There are known unknowns, things we know we don't know. But beyond that, there are unknown unknowns, things we don't know we don't know." Are you feeling dizzy yet? The meaning of this passage is that although the U.S. military didn't find weapons of mass destruction, this doesn't prove those weapons don't exist. And not only that, but this passage also hints that Saddam's threat might be more serious than Americans originally thought, because it falls into the category of unknown unknowns. As the author sighed that Rumsfeld is truly an old hand, very familiar with the script of fear culture. After that press conference, many Western politicians started using the expression unknown unknowns to describe some ghostly terror. Even though those threats might not exist at all, to make their fear performances more effective, Western politicians would praise the fear and anxiety in people's hearts. They tell voters, "I know you're afraid, it's okay, it's normal." Not only normal, it's very beneficial. For example, American political scientist George Marcus claims that anxiety helps people become better citizens. Why?
His explanation is that most Americans don't know much about politics and have little understanding of candidates' stances on various issues.
However, citizens filled with anxiety are often more informed because emotions drive them to grasp the key points amid great uncertainty. The 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, is a master of fear performances. Whether during the campaign or after entering the White House, he relentlessly emphasized that America is unsafe. For example, Mexicans bring crime and drug immigrants, stealing American jobs. China threatens America's economic status, and so on. So what to do about this insecurity? Trump also gave a very simple answer. Just vote for me. In 2016, when Trump accepted the Republican presidential nomination, he said, "I have a message for everyone. The crime and violence plaguing our nation today will soon, very soon, come to an end." The implication is that only he, Trump, can protect American safety. Having covered the media and politicians, let's finally look at scientists. The author points out that today's Western scientific community has also adopted the habits of fear culture. Scientists publishing research to warn the public is not problematic in itself. The problem is that more scientists love using sensational tones in science communication, bombarding the public with prophecies of global catastrophe. Even some highly respected scientists are no exception. For example, astronomer Martin Rees wrote a book called Our Final Hour. This book tells readers that humanity's chance of surviving until 2100 is only 50%. And claims that humanity will go extinct in the near future aren't new. However, historically, such prophecies were usually delivered in heavy, severe, somber tones. But in Rees's book, the doomsday theory is presented in a lighthearted, almost petulant tone. Rees writes in the book that he'd bet $1,000 that by 2020, events like bioterrorism would claim millions of lives. Here's another example. Humanity eradicated smallpox in the 20th century, but some scientists worry that, due to climate change, Siberian permafrost may thaw, exposing bodies of smallpox victims from before the 20th century, causing smallpox to resurge and ravage populations. A medical scientist named Pascal Bruckner lamented in despair. Before humanity conquers one disease, others arrive in succession, making human efforts seem futile and absurd. Even seemingly pleasant activities like barbecuing are condemned by scientists as environmentally destructive. Why, what? In 2006, Professor Paul Hunter from the University of East Anglia wrote that as weather warms, Britons increasingly enjoy outdoor barbecues, yet this behavior is dangerous. First, this food preparation method is unhygienic, making Britons vulnerable to bacteria like salmonella.
Second, rising outdoor temperatures may trigger malaria outbreaks.
Third, charcoal used in barbecues produces significant carbon emissions, not to mention grilled meat possibly causing cancer. So why do scientists use such sensational tones? Climatologist Stephen Schneider explained, "We need to capture the public's imagination. We must offer scary scenarios, use simplified dramatic statements, and avoid showing our doubts." Shiner's colleague David Viner also agrees with this view. Viner highly praises Hollywood movies. The movie The Day After Tomorrow depicts how the greenhouse effect causes abnormal climate changes. Tornadoes and tsunamis, earthquakes ravage globally, making it a typical Hollywood disaster movie. Viner says that although the movie has many factual errors, it can raise awareness about climate change, which is a good thing. In summary, many scientists today believe that powerful, even alarmist fear appeals are more persuasive than mild and weak ones. The result is that media, politicians, and scientists, without conspiring, use overwhelming sensational rhetoric to plunge all of humanity deeper into a culture of fear. All right, finally in part 3, let's understand what harms this contemporary fear culture brings and how should we respond. First, let's talk about the harms. The author believes that first, today's fear culture weakens the power of morality. In the past, people relied on virtues to cope with fear, but now we have unknowingly distanced ourselves from these virtues, such as courage. Remember? As we mentioned earlier, Aristotle believed that courage can help people eliminate the fear of death. If a person believes their actions are noble, they will possess unparalleled courage and be willing to stand up for the benefit of others. However, today's people only want to assess risks in various ways, but are unwilling to muster the courage to do what's right.
This risk-averse attitude has even affected the behavior of police and military personnel.
In May 2007, in Manchester, UK, a 10-year-old boy jumped into a pond to save his drowning sister and unfortunately died.
At the time of the incident, 2 police officers were standing by the pond but did not jump in, watching the tragedy unfold.
Afterwards, the 2 officers defended themselves, saying they lacked training in water rescue, and this reason was supported by the police department. The author comments in the book that police choosing to stand by while a child drowns shows how absurdly biased people today are towards avoiding risks. And if even police are unwilling to take responsibility for helping others, then ordinary people will be even more hesitant and panicked when facing danger. Of course, courage and heroism are still celebrated in today's films and literature, but in daily life we've drifted away from these virtues. Traditional morality emphasized responsibility and altruism. Today, many so-called virtues are merely tools people use to achieve personal happiness. For example, there's a book called The Mindfulness Pocketbook, Practices for a Peaceful Life. In the chapter on cultivating courage, it suggests, trying new things and learning requires courage, like joining a fitness class, even if you don't know the moves, or going to places you've never been. For instance, trying a restaurant you wouldn't normally visit, that builds courage. Aristotle would probably find such advice absurd if he heard it. Another clear harm of fear culture is its impact on young people's growth and maturity.
Today's children are portrayed as super fragile individuals, requiring exhaustive protection. Any pressure, criticism, or stress might harm their health.
In this environment, parents and educators hesitate to apply any pressure to children. In Australia, teachers are advised to use blue or green pens instead of red for grading, less aggressive colors. Supposedly, this improves students' mood when receiving their workbooks. In the UK, many teachers no longer mark wrong answers with crosses because they fear those crosses might pressure or psychologically harm children. However, only through experiencing pressure and adversity can a child truly grow. In today's society, overprotection limits opportunities to develop independence and risk-taking, greatly extending youth dependency on adults. Some young people in their 20s remain psychologically childlike. Even after graduating and entering society, they remain fragile, immature adult babies, unwilling to take public responsibility or risks. The most extreme consequence of fear culture is making people view the future negatively, perhaps its most severe effect.
And this consequence is already taking shape today.
Contemporary society is saturated with pessimistic views of the future. People believe bad things are inevitable and unavoidable. The question isn't if they'll happen, but when and how quickly. This pessimism breeds another sentiment, that humanity itself is to blame for everything. Humanity is destined to drag the entire world into the abyss of destruction. Humans aren't problem solvers. We are the problem itself. This fear even extends to newborn babies. Throughout history, every civilization has viewed childbirth as a joyous event. However, today people have begun to fear having children, believing humanity must strictly control birth rates. An Australian doctor named Barry Walters wrote that every new life increases greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, we shouldn't provide financial subsidies to new mothers. Instead, following the polluter pays environmental principle, we should tax parents through carbon emission taxes. Can humanity survive the 21st century? That question was already troubling enough. Now it's escalated to whether humanity should continue existing at all. Fear of the future has shaken our self-belief. So, what can we do? The author believes we mustn't accept this. Humanity shouldn't define itself as fragile or let fear dominate us. Beyond blind fear and anxiety, we actually have alternatives. How to combat fear isn't the book's main focus, but the author still offers solutions. For example, we should foster independence in children's thinking and actions, giving them room to experiment and take risks, building self-esteem and confidence to face challenges. More crucially, combating fear requires reawakening the moral awareness we've distanced from. Two virtues are most vital here. First is courage.
As mentioned before, courageous people still feel fear but aren't paralyzed by it. They act rightly for noble causes.
As Churchill said, courage is humanity's foremost quality because it guarantees all others. Another crucial moral quality is prudence. Prudence means taking the wisest action possible regarding any threat or risk. A prudent person first acknowledges risk exists. Then they examine its nature, make reasoned judgments, and choose optimal responses. Unlike avoiding risks, prudence maintains an open attitude toward risks and dares to take them when appropriate. But, as Madame Curie said, there's nothing in life to be feared, only understood. To reduce our fears, it's time to understand more about things. All right, this concludes our interpretation of the book, Fear. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.